Well, welcome back to HSM Reads the Bible, the podcast. I'm Zach.
I'm Makayla.
I'm Dylan.
And today we are covering the end of Judges, all of Ruth, and the first 8 chapters of 1 Samuel.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
But we do move from one of my very least favorite passages of the whole Bible to a few of my very favorites. So personally, I'm excited, although not thrilled to have to start with Judges. But, man, how we feeling after this week's reading?
Dark.
I love the book of Judges. I feel bad for it.
You and I have very different perspectives on Judges.
Not because of like the situation of Judges. Like Judges, like you said, is one of the most tragic books, if not. I won't say the most. It might be the most tragic book.
I think it's the most tragic book in the Bible.
In the Bible, in the
Old
Testament,
Bible.
for sure. But man, there's a lot of God's faithful throughout the whole thing, in spite of His people's unfaithfulness.
Listen, I'm not saying it shouldn't be in the Bible. It's just one of my least favorite books of the Bible to read, because once you get past the first few chapters, it's just like, and it got worse.
It's just
and
one
it
that
got
you
worse.
don't reread it.
And
for
it got
funsies.
worse.
You just read it when you're reading a Bible reading plan.
I apparently one of the last times that I read Judges, I had a note in my Bible that I finished Judges on Good Friday, and it was like, ooh, yeah, that was a very fitting,
Yeah.
a very fitting day to conclude the book of Judges. But,
Yeah.
Well, enough of this. Let's talk about what we actually saw in this week's reading. What do we see about God? What do we see about God's people? And are there any questions that we have? And there's a few passages that are probably worth us talking about.
Yeah, for
at
sure.
the end of this. But to begin, and maybe we start Judges, move towards Ruth, move towards Samuel, so there's some chronology to it. But what did we see about God in this week's reading?
I feel like more so maybe than the other readings, God seems to be silent. Like it's like He is kind of taken off center stage from like a perspective, and we're really just looking at the depravity of everyone else. And so in that sense, I think excuse me, we see less about God just because I think He is kind of like let them have at it.
Yeah, which I think in and of itself does reveal something to us about God. Like it was kind of front and center in the Exodus story where Pharaoh hardens his heart and then God hardens Pharaoh's heart. It's like, well, like God has given Pharaoh over to the desires of his heart. But now we see it with God's people in particular. It's like, well, they've rebelled, and now God has given them over to the desires of their heart. They get to decide what's right for themselves. And there is something to that of like, our hearts can become so hardened to God that He gives us over to that to deal with the consequences of our rebellion. Dill, you love Judges.
I do.
What do you see about God in Judges?
Man, God is faithful throughout. I mean, obviously throughout the Bible, but the reason why I love Judges so much is because like we see the worst of God's people in the Bible, the absolute worst, the worst of the worst. I mean, I forgot what happened in Judges, specifically 20 and 21. It's gross and it's tough and it's terrible, but God doesn't abandon His people. He is faithful to His covenant through and through. And there's obviously a lot of teaching, because I think that's a poor illustration. I don't even want to illustrate that because Judges is so bad. But it's like I remember when I was a kid and I would like want to do something my way. Whenever I go work with my dad or something, he'd be like, yeah, go ahead. We'll do it your way.
Try that. See what happens.
And, obviously it'd never pan out. And then I'd have to call for my dad to come do it his way and, figure it out. And, we see that. So there's a lot of, like, teaching just by, like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, you go ahead. You go ahead and do it your way, see what happens. But, man, God is faithful through and through, doesn't abandon His people, is faithful to His covenant, in spite of, like, the worst, most heinous crimes, like, that you don't just see in the Bible, but just in the world in general happen in the book of Judges. So
I think the marriage between the two places that we're at right now is the book of Ruth. That, we do see God in Judges kind of get silent. Like, there's not a ton. He's talking to His people a little bit at the very end, but he's not like pouring out blessing on them. It's just like, hey, we're going to go to civil war. And He's like, okay, like, I guess go kill off the people of Benjamin, and then we'll deal with the consequences of that. But then we pick up Ruth, and Ruth begins with, at the time the judges ruled Israel. And so, we have in Judges, God seems very quiet, and yet in Ruth, God seems very near.
Yeah.
And I think it's that place of like, on a national scale, Israel has forsaken God. They're doing all of these wicked things, and yet we still see God moving in these more personal aspects. Like, you get the story of Ruth and Him there. So I think to me, the way to hold both of those pieces of this book that, again, is a really complicated, tough book, is that Ruth is the very next story. And it's like, hey, but also in the midst of all this wickedness, look at how God is providing and being faithful to his people and doing all the things and setting up what would happen next through Ruth's line. So, yeah, Judges is tough. But what do you guys see about God and Ruth?
Again, like, we don't really hear a lot directly from God, like no quotes per se, but we see his just sovereignty in the way that he orchestrates her kinsman redeemer. And
which we'll get that's gonna be one of the, we're basically gonna reserve the last third of this podcast for like what was happening in Ruth. That would be, but yes, so God's orchestrating events.
So just like even like you're saying, even in the chaos, even in the silence, God is clearly working. And is very kind.
I think I saw a lot of like just mercy in the story of Ruth, because it starts out just tragedy, like horrible. Naomi's husband passes, and then over the next 10 years, her two sons who are not very faithful. Like, we learn that they're doing the wrong stuff. They end up passing, and Naomi is just
even
left.
The start of the story is there's famine. Like we get to even the beginning of the story. It's the backdrop is just suffering.
And Naomi's left with literally nothing. I mean, she has her daughter-in-law Ruth, but no money, nothing, and it just seems like she's gonna die essentially. Like, this famine, poverty's gonna take her over. But then we see God provide in a really, really beautiful way through Boaz, the kinsman redeemer, who I think is a Christ figure in the Old Testament.
100% agree.
And so just mercy.
And I think, Makayla, you were hitting on this a little bit, but there's this really interesting piece of, like, I don't know, I just leave, every time I read Judges, I just leave it with this sense of just despair. And then you pick up in Ruth, and like you were saying, it starts off in this really dark place. But then by the end of Ruth, we get, and Ruth is David's great-great-grandma. And it's like, oh, like the one that is going to be like the next defining moment in Scripture, when God makes a covenant with David. God is bringing David about through all of this. And so it's his sovereignty, it's his mercy, and it's like this long game with God. And I think that there is this piece of, like, we talk about 1,000 days is like a year is like 1,000 days. We have this idea. I think I messed that quote up, but it's okay. We'll let it ride.
We know what you mean.
Even like last week, Steve ended HSM by singing Waymaker, of this idea of, like, even when I don't see it, you're working. And I think Ruth paints that picture for us of God, of, like, in the midst of the darkest places and in a foreign land. It's not even, like, Ruth is a Moabite. She's not one of God's chosen people, but God is still bringing about his plans and his purposes. And I think there's an invitation to us to trust him, that he is doing what he promised he would do, even when everything around us, be it the famine, be it the utter, I don't know at what point in Judges this is happening, but it seems that it's probably in the midst of just the utter depravity of it, that God is still moving and working and bringing about the redemption of his people. That's always struck me with Ruth. Well, what about Samuel? We get to the first 8 chapters of Samuel. What do y'all see about God in those first few pages?
That one, it's like, okay, God's kind of come back on the scene in a more leading character kind of way.
Yeah, this shift back to him is a pretty significant
It's abrupt
one.
in a good way. Like, you're like, finally.
I think I actually wrote in my Bible, finally, this morning as I finished the passage.
What was that? A big exhale?
I actually thought the story of Samuel was pretty tragic. I mean, God is being so faithful in bringing about, like, a genuine prophet who's not like Phineas and not really like Eli. Eli's kind of, Makayla, you said it earlier, he's kind of okay. But man, Samuel comes on the scene, who lives a very, very faithful life. And God does an amazing work through him. But man, you can't help but feel for the guy, because he's surrounded by a terrible, terrible, terrible nation who is just utterly rejecting Yahweh and demanding for themselves a king, and his sons were terrible. And it's just, I read the story of Samuel, I was like, praise God at last, finally, but I was like, man, I feel awful for you. You were being so faithful, and the people around you are so terrible. But
But I think, you know, as we get back to like what do we see about God in the story of Samuel, you have kind of the cosmic picture of God orchestrating events for his people. There's the whole like battle scene between the Philistines and God's people, and then God ultimately being like, I'm bringing my ark back. But then there's this intimate nearness of God that we haven't had as clear of a picture of since Moses.
Yeah.
Where God is speaking to Samuel in the quiet of the night, and he's calling him to himself, and Samuel doesn't know what to do with it. And the tragedy is Eli doesn't know what to do with it either. Like the priest of Israel is like, I don't know the voice of God. But God calls Samuel to himself, and he fills Samuel with his spirit, and he grows Samuel up in his presence. And so there's both this picture of like God orchestrating the big things, but also his intimate nearness to his people that gets back on display in Samuel that I really love. We get to see God's power on display again. I love the story of the ark being taken into the Philistine temple, but I love the picture of like, and we'll see it throughout kind of the story of Samuel and the kings, but like, and we saw it in the Exodus, that here's this pagan god who the Philistines think has all the power, and they bring the Ark of the Covenant, which is not God, but just the representation of God, his presence, comes into the temple. They set it next to Dagon, and they come in the next morning, and he's fallen flat on his face. His head's broken off. His arms are broken off. And there's just this picture of like, man, God is so much more powerful than any of these like pagan deities. He's not to be messed with. And he's not to be manipulated, because, you know, the people of Israel, they bring the Ark of the Covenant to battle because they're like, well, as long as we take like this box with us, then like God's going to give us whatever we want to.
Yeah.
And they treat God like some kind of manipulable entity, and that's just not how God works.
We'll see that pretty soon with Samuel and Saul.
Yeah.
That plays out. So probably next week, maybe.
I think next week's reading we'll get that.
Yeah.
But I think so often we can be tempted to treat God the same way.
Oh yeah.
Like, well, I'll like do a good thing so that God will give me what I want, or I'll, you know, go to church so I can get a girlfriend, or whatever your thing is. And it's just like that's not how God works. He's not someone we can just manipulate into giving us what we want. He is all powerful. He is the sovereign God of the universe. Our job is to follow him, not try to get him to do what we want him to do. But I think we see that about God as well. Anything else y'all want to add as far as like what we see about God in any of these, whether Judges, Ruth, the first 8 chapters of Samuel?
I don't think so.
I think so.
So what do we see about God's people this week?
Not good. What stood out to me specifically, like a specific sin of God's people, is syncretism.
Okay, define that word.
Syncretism is the worship of, put it simply, is the worship of Yahweh, and basically lumping him in with these other idols.
Yeah.
We see that in the story of Micah, when he gets these 1,100 pieces of silver, and his mom,
household gods.
Yeah, and his mom was like, "I'm dedicating this to the Lord," and then she uses that money to build an idol, to add, you know, a carved image and an ephod and all these different things to add to Micah's house.
Yeah.
And so it's like this worship of Yahweh and of these idols. And
is that the first place? I think that's the first place we get that kind of famous line of Judges.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
It's the very.
In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
It's there, and I think it's literally the last line in the book of Judges.
Yeah.
And so it is, which today, because we live in this culture that's like, hey, you do you, your truth, my truth, all this stuff.
Yeah.
We read that line and we're like, yep, that checks out. But this is like a statement on the depravity of Israel, that instead of trusting in God's law, instead of trusting in his revelation of who he is, there's no king, there's no one giving any direction, and everyone is defining what's true, what's good, what's right for themselves, which is what leads, chapter 17 is like the turning point of Judges to me. Everything before it is like, not great, but like, okay. And chapter 17 onward is just pure, utter, undefiled wickedness. Or defiled, whatever you want to say. And that line there, I think, is the turning point. Like, everyone is defining what's true, what's good, what's right for themselves. And when left to our own devices, we only are drawn to what's wicked. And
I think I really want to, reemphasize something that you said. I think that continues to be a sin today, where we redefine how God wants to be worshipped and served. Where we're like, as long as I pray and I do these things, then, I'm good. when there's so many other things in our life that we worship as well. It's not, it is, I would argue, you can disagree with me on this, I would argue that it is just as common today as it was in the Old Testament.
Oh, I wouldn't argue with you on that at all.
One of my really close Johnson buddies that I graduated with, I heard him preach a sermon one time, and I had never heard this. But in his sermon, he was like, everybody says that the number one worst sin in the world today is pride. And he said, I disagree with that. I think it's still idolatry. And like went on and like give this amazing like breakdown of how like, you know, one of the biggest things that we're blind to is what idolatry is. Because we all think it's, you know, the sin of Micah, building this carved image and bowing down before it. But it's not that. It's, you know, the definition of worship is ascribing worth to something. And look at all the things that we do that to in our lives. And so, sorry, that was a little rabbit trail. But
no, I think it ties right in. But I think, you know, again, Judges just keeps getting darker. But I think several weeks ago when we were in Genesis, we talked about Sodom and Gomorrah and this picture that these two cities offer of just this utter depravity and wickedness. And they're destroyed for it. God rains down fire and sulfur on them. And here in Judges, we get in chapter 19, the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah gets repeated and even like added to. Israel sees their sin and raises them one with the way that the concubine of the Levite is treated, and then ultimately what the Levite does with her body. And it's this picture again of like when we, even as God's people, when we take our eyes off of God and we define truth for ourselves, the end result of that only ever becomes more wickedness, more sin, more brokenness, more pain, more suffering. And to me, that's like the biggest thing that the book of Judges says about God's people.
We'll get to some of this, I think, in a little bit. I do think the story of Samson is a little bit more confusing compared to some.
Yeah.
For other reasons, we'll get to it. But most of it, you're just like, not good.
Yeah.
So.
I love the story of Samson.
Talk about it.
I love the story. I love the story of Samson so much. Well, that's really, we see syncretism there as well.
Sure.
Because we see Manoah from the Danites, and his wife was barren. We see this amazing encounter with the angel of the Lord.
Who they don't recognize.
They're
talking to God and they have no idea.
Yeah. And the Lord blesses them with a son who would raise up and judge over Israel. And they name him Samson, which literally, I think, sorry, Steve Cook, I think means son of the sun, which is an incredibly pagan name.
Yeah.
Insane.
Also, let's, Samson is specifically set apart, I think for the first time in Scripture, as a Nazirite.
Yeah.
So let's chat that out. Like, what's a Nazirite?
Yeah, so Nazirite is basically someone who is dedicated to the Lord.
It has three components.
Three rules to it, which, again, irony, dedicated to the Lord, and his name is son of the sun. No bick.
No bick, no booze, no bodies.
No bick, no booze, no bodies.
I don't remember who taught me that, but it's stuck forever.
Either.
I think it was Jody.
That
maybe.
probably is right. Yeah.
No razor on his head.
Yeah, can't shave their head, can't
no
drink
alcohol,
and they can't touch a corpse.
Yep, no dead bodies.
And Samson doesn't really hold faithful to
any of those.
Yeah. Any of those.
Not a single one.
Does a
He's
very
getting
poor
drunk
job.
with his pagan friends.
Yep.
He is eating honey out of a dead lion's body,
Which he killed.
and ultimately gives Delilah the secret to his. Samson is dealing with a lot of dead bodies. He's just killing everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then ultimately has his haircut. So complete unfaithfulness to everything that God set out for him. And yet is repeatedly filled with God's Spirit.
Yeah.
Is listed in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews.
Is listed in the Hall of Faith with Hebrews right next to Jephthah.
Which is crazy.
Which I guess, again, if we want to ask, like, what do we see about God? There's this picture of his redemptive work in his broken, sinful people.
Yeah. I mean, you see I don't know if at one point in Samson's life, until the end of the story, Samson does one good thing.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
other
just
than
the end,
crush the Philistines.
Yeah.
But really, he did that for selfish desire and gain.
Yeah,
Samson,
they took his wife that he rejected anyways.
Samson also pulls the greatest prank I've ever seen. I have ever seen. In capturing 300 foxes, tying them together with torches, and burning all of their food.
How does one, like, did he create like a barn to put them in? Like, I don't understand how one captures 300
He did.
fox.
This is the time machine question. Like, what would you go back and look at?
That
There's a
Yeah.
lot of really good points that we should be like, the resurrection. Obviously,
Yeah.
the resurrection. Also, like, this setup would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
yeah.
For sure.
Like, how to get? I have a lot of questions.
Meticulously. He was very. How angry do you have to be to say
I'm gonna go catch 300 foxes.
300 foxes, and I'm going to use them to burn all of
And
your
wrangle
food?
them all together
Yeah.
to tie them together. I don't understand.
It's a whole.
It's
thing.
it's amazing, but I mean, just a entire life of unfaithfulness.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, shaved head, no eyes, is literally being used for entertainment at this massive Philistine festival,
Yeah.
celebrating Dagon handing Samson over
Yeah.
into their hands, and he's being laughed at. People are throwing stuff at him, making
Yeah.
fun of him, and there's just this moment where he says, it's like this
One last
redemptive
time.
moment, one last time,
One
fill
last
me with
time.
strength.
Yeah.
And then, we see Samson move these pillars, and then it says in that one instance, he killed more Philistines than he had throughout his entire life, which was a lot.
Which was
Yeah.
a lot of
A
Philistines.
lot.
Yeah.
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 So,
But there's that tension, right?
Mhm.
Of God's people's unfaithfulness, yet his faithfulness to him, his redemptive work, even in the midst of brokenness and sinfulness. And God gives his people over to their desires, and yet he doesn't
Mhm.
reject them.
And I think we'll see it again with David, but it's a good reminder, I think, for like I'll speak for myself. In like the parable of the older brother, younger brother,
Yeah.
I tend to be the older brother. Like
Yeah.
I tend to lean more towards like being a Pharisee, which I know that's like, if you don't know what that is, sorry, I don't have
We'll
time
get
to.
there. We're gonna get there in a few months.
But I think there can be a tendency to read this and like you said, he's mentioned in the Hall of Faith and be like, well, he doesn't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
And then I kind of catch myself being like, well, none of us really
Neither do
deserve to
I.
be there.
Yeah.
And like, who am I to say, like, I don't know, maybe at the end of his life it was selfish, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe he
Yeah.
like was truly humbled, and like that's a heart thing between him and God.
Yeah.
But I thought about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. What do we see about God's people in Ruth? This one's way more nuanced to me.
Mm-hmm.
actually, quite a bit of faithfulness.
A lot, right? Specifically in the character of Ruth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even, man, I love Naomi's turnaround. Because there's a few places, right? She's kind of back and forth. She goes with her husband to this pagan land. She gives over her sons to these Gentile women, which is explicitly forbidden in the law.
Yep.
So there's this piece of unfaithfulness. But then when everything goes south and she's ready to go back home, she very generously, like, the only thing at this point that would have been sustaining Naomi would be her daughters-in-law. Like, that would have been the only way. She's an older woman who can't work, can't make any money for herself. The only way she has any security is in these people, but she, as this act of self-giving, love, says, hey, why don't you go back? Like, you have a life here. Like, don't give your life away to me. She gets to Israel, and she names herself Mara. She says, I'm really bitter now.
Yeah.
But then when Boaz shows up, she turns from her bitterness to her blessing and starts giving away this blessing. And I just love this picture of a woman who, like, is still in progress and God is still working on, and who is, over the course of her life, turning more and more into someone who trusts in God's provision. But yeah, a lot of faithfulness there.
Yeah. In such a small story.
Yeah.
True.
A very small story.
Until the last sentence where you're like, oh, this is a big deal.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, the whole book, it's
Yeah.
like, why do we zoom in on this one character?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, because this is all,
Yeah.
again, we're like back to that first promise in Genesis 3
Yeah.
that God's going to send a snake crusher to make all
Yeah.
things right. And it's
Yeah.
like random. Oh, because Ruth is the woman who would have the son, who would have the son, who would have David. And becomes this big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of faithfulness there. Through a lot of messiness. And then we get to Samuel.
Yep.
What do we see about God's people in Samuel?
Bad.
Yeah, I mean, everyone around him not doing so great.
For the most part, I love Hannah.
Well, yeah.
I love
okay,
Hannah.
good point.
I mean, even Hannah's prayer gets kind of put next to the priest, Eli, who sees a woman praying and thinks that
Yeah.
she's drunk,
Yeah.
which is an indictment of
Yeah.
Eli.
It's not
Yeah.
Again, like, it is not. We're supposed to see Eli and his family compared to Hannah and Samuel and see that as like,
Yeah.
okay, all of Israel's leadership has become so corrupted in this time of the judges.
Yep.
But then we get Samuel, the last judge, who is faithful and walks in obedience. And so there is supposed to be this like side by side, but we do see a lot of wickedness, and we also see a lot of faithfulness, and we see like the faithfulness ultimately win out.
Yeah.
As God moves to restore and redeem and renew his people, even though they are pretty broken.
Yeah. Pretty broken is an understatement. They're not doing well at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we talked about a little bit when we were talking about God, but I do want to hit again, like, the people are going to war with the Philistines, not because God tells them to, but because, like, they want to. And they think that if they just bring the Ark of the Covenant with them, that them doing, like, a religious thing will guarantee them God's favor.
Yeah.
Which is the ultimate, like, that is what paganism is. The idea of paganism is that we can manipulate the gods by doing the right things to get what we want.
Yeah.
Whereas God says, no, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. Like, you are not manipulating me to get what I want. You are supposed to submit yourself to me so that I can do what I want through you. And we see the people of Israel treating God the same way the pagans do. And it does not go well for them.
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
And then I think at the end of our reading, just outright rejecting his leadership, demanding a king for themselves, like an earthly king.
Yeah.
To be like everybody else.
Yep.
Which is an interesting, like we had just read in Judges, the refrain of, in that time Israel had no king, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And then we end this week's reading with, God finally says, give them what they want.
Yeah. So what happened in Ruth?
Good question. So a lot of historical context in the Jewish culture, and like, correct me if I misspeak, but if a husband passed away, then it was the duty of the brother to step in and provide for that wife by making sure she had an offspring, an heir.
So the word that you'll find in the law is the idea of levirate marriage. That, yes, exactly what you're talking about, which we read and we're like,
that's weird.
Is weird.
Yeah.
And that's a fair response to it. But yes, because lines and lineage and family ties are so important, the next in line was supposed to forsake their right to have an heir for themselves to give the other person an heir.
And Naomi remembers this.
Yes.
Which we already talked about. Like, she hadn't done so great on following the law, but she remembered this part. And so when Ruth meets Boaz, Naomi realizes, oh, he is actually part of her. So, like, the kinsman redeemer word that shows up, if you've ever heard somebody say the word like kin, meaning like family, that's kind of what that means, is she's recognizing, oh, he's in our extended family. He could fulfill this for us. He could step in.
Yeah.
And then I'll let y'all explain how that can be a type.
Well, yes. So there's also this interesting piece, because we see kind of what we were talking about with the whole, like, you forsake your rights to give yourself away for somebody else. When Boaz says, hey, I would love to redeem you, but I'm actually not the next in line. There's this other guy. And the other guy, when he finds out, like, you can redeem the fields, you can increase your property, he's like, yes, I would love to. And Boaz says, you also have to become Ruth's husband. He goes, I cannot do that. I will not do that. Is a big moment where Boaz is like, I will gladly give away my rights to make Ruth's husband have an heir. I will gladly redeem her at great cost to myself, is a beautiful thing. And, Dill, who is that like? Jesus.
Is that ASMR?
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So jumping way forward in Bible history, like, David becomes the person that God would make a covenant with, that he would have a descendant on his throne who would reign forever. Jesus is commonly referred to as someone who is in the line of David. And it's so interesting to me that the one who would be like the great whatever grandfather of Jesus, the Redeemer of the world, would himself only be in existence because someone in his family line was redeemed, which is a big deal.
And with a non-Jewish woman.
With a non-Jewish woman. A lot of times when we read the Bible, we think that God starts to care about the Gentiles in the book of Acts, but that's just not true. Like Rahab, the prostitute who lived in Jericho, part of Jesus' family line. She's a Gentile who's brought into the covenant. Ruth, Gentile who's brought into the covenant. God has always been about bringing the whole world into his covenant people. It's just Israel was really, really bad at it, and became very self-focused instead of other-focused. Anything else we should touch on as far as weird passages in this week's reading?
Yeah, probably what happens with Micah and the Danites, and
Yeah.
I think we need to.
Okay.
It's a tough one.
So we've talked about it before, that just because it happens
Sorry, Benjaminites.
in the Bible does not mean that God
Mm-hmm.
is happy about it.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is the example par excellence of that, of just, this is total wickedness. Like, Micah has, Micah's the guy who, like, makes an idol
Yeah.
and then finds a Levite who's supposed to be the priestly caste of the people who were supposed to be, like, directing people to God. And he's like, I'll pay you to worship an idol and make me an important person. And the Levite's like, of course, why would I not want to do that?
Yeah.
Just wickedness.
Yeah. Have you seen the videos? This might be a stupid example, but it's like people make art with dominoes, and whenever they knock over one domino, it like knocks into two dominoes, which knocks into three, which knocks into like 500.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what happens in the story, I think. Because we see Micah make this idol. Bad. We see this Levi come in. Bad. Then we see this group of
Danites who come in to like kidnap him.
Yeah, who are like, we need land, so we're gonna go do this, and we're gonna take this idol
because
to kind of
they
bless
failed
us.
to actually do what God told them to do at the beginning of
Yeah.
Judges.
Yeah.
They were the ones who were kind of like, we give up.
And then I got to the end of this chapter, and I was like, they succeed. Like, they have this massive victory, and I was like, hang on, that's atypical.
Yeah.
And then the story continues. I'm like, okay. And then we see this great, horrible wickedness enacted where, you know, we see this concubine taken. We see the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah repeated. And then they get pretty much wiped out.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, there's the judgment. Where it's like, you know, you see the sin just grow and manifest, and then they get completely demolished. But then there's even more wickedness where it's like, we can't let a tribe get demolished. And
so they start stealing women.
They start kidnapping women.
Yeah.
Which, this is where it pays off. Got to know the law here. Like, that is a crime punishable by death.
Yeah.
Where if you, I think it's Exodus 19, where if you steal someone, you're to be put down. And they steal hundreds of women.
Yeah.
And then that, like, it ends up like, and I think that's kind of where we see God's faithfulness to his people. Because even through this wicked act, like, they're preserved, they're protected, which we can't say it's a good thing. It's not. It's terrible. Yeah. But, like, that's where Judges ends. Literally, Judges 21, 25, in those days there was no king, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Yeah.
And it's like this, man, just this ongoing, like, horrible wickedness.
Judges is the picture that sin, when it is conceived and fully grown, brings forth death.
Yep.
And the craziest part about that story is the guy who wrote that line, Paul, was, if I'm not mistaken, from the tribe of Benjamin. And so even like the existence of Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, he comes out of this place where in utter wickedness they kidnap a bunch of women to sustain this tribe. And so it's both of those things. Like, it is the utter depravity of people and how quickly our hearts will lead us astray. Psalms would say the heart is deceitful above all else. And man, it's true. We see it here. And yet God is faithful to his people. And would, you know, the guy who maybe did more to take the gospel to the ends of the earth than anybody else before him is from the tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that except to say that God is good and is worthy of our praise and worship.
I think we need to have Joseph's quote, like, in front of us throughout the entire Old Testament. What you meant for evil, God meant for good.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole Old Testament. Like, I keep having to remind myself of that. But, yeah.
Makayla, do you have a question for us, please?
Yeah, there was only one lighthearted part in this whole thing, and that was the fox situation. So I need you all to give me your strategy.
Okay.
If you were tasked with wrangling 300 fox, what would you do?
Oh, my gosh.
I don't know anything about foxes. Do you?
If I had to...
I don't even know where to find one.
I mean...
they live in dens? I think.
Okay.
I don't know. There's a lot of neighborhoods called, like, fox dens. So it feels like that's where they live.
First I would wrangle 600 chickens. To offer one fox 2 chickens.
Yep. Well, that was actually where my mind went. Is like foxes love to break into like gardens and chicken coops. So you probably want to plant a garden
Yep.
Open the door.
Mm.
Close the door.
Yep.
See how many foxes you've got.
But didn't he like tie their tails together? Like, how does that work?
I don't get it, in all honesty.
Listen, he did it.
I don't understand.
He did it. Well, you know what is even more unbelievable to me than that is him killing, I don't know how many Philistines
With a jawbone of a donkey. Yeah.
Which if I could see
Fair.
anything in, like, from our
Yeah.
I'm sitting on a hill and I'm watching that. Like, which might be morbid, but, like,
You always want to see the war scenes.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. Like, I want to know how he did that.
Yep.
It's a wild story. I think I'm creating some kind of trap that has some kind of, whether it's chickens or whatever, shutting as many foxes in as I can. But then it gets real murky from there. Like, how am I going to tie torches to their tails?
I don't understand.
I think I would just find 300 buddies to go and set the field on fire.
Well, I think
that
once
feels like the better
I think
option.
once you have the foxes, it's easy to tie their tails together.
How?
I don't think so.
You tie
'Cause
two
they're all
tails
together
together,
in
and then where does the
No,
next tail go?
the other day, I had
What
to
do you
give
mean?
my dog.
It's pairs of foxes.
I
that
had
he
to
turned
give my
loose.
dog
So it's
medicine.
like 150 pairs that he turned
I had
loose.
one dog who always lives in my
Oh.
house, who like likes me and feels comfortable with me. And I was trying to just to put this syringe of medicine in his mouth, and I could not get his mouth open.
That's
That's
why you
funny,
gotta get
yeah.
some cheese.
Listen, eventually we like got peanut butter. We mixed the medicine with the peanut butter. We put
Yeah,
it was a
there
whole
you go.
thing. But there's no way you can tell me that if I can't figure out how to get like a few ounces of medicine into the dog's mouth, who knows me and trusts me, that it's an easy thing to tie the tails.
We're
of foxes
also
together.
talking about the guy who pulled up gate posts and carried them to the top of a hill,
Yeah.
getting away from an ambush. I think he could handle a fox.
Yeah, but we're
And
not
just
talking
be
about
like-
how Samson. We're talking about how we would do it. I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
how I'm going to pull that one off.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely think I would have to have the strength of Samson. to
Maybe
be able
you
to do
just
that.
set the foxes themselves on fire and then turn them loose.
And on that note,
You shouldn't do that. Anyways, thanks for listening to HSM Reads the Bible, the podcast. I'm Zach.
I'm Makayla.
I'm Dylan.
Please don't set any animals on fire this week. Thank you.